Dumelang, welcome to Face the Nation. My name is Clement Manyatela. Great to have you with us here on SABC News. On the show tonight, is it a GNU or is it a coalition? And does it really matter? The DA's federal executive, Helen Zille, says while it's being officially called that, it's really not. She says this is a coalition between the ANC and the DA. The ANC says it insists it is a government of national unity. So this has renewed public spats between the ANC and the DA as the majority parties in this government of national unity / coalition. So Professor William Gumede and Dr. Ongama Mtimka will speak to us about what all of this means and what it's going to take to keep this arrangement together. Also on the show, why are some South Africans against Miss SA contestant Chidimma Vanessa Adetshina? Many people say because she has Nigerian and Mozambican heritage, she doesn't fully represent South Africa. What does this say about our psyche as a society, and why is government quiet? Why are they not coming out to defend her, to take her out of the misery and abuse? The patriotic Alliances Kenny Kunene will tell us why his party is against her participation in Miss South Africa. He will be joined by the EFF, which is firmly behind her. And then later, we'll look at social media and conversations around xenophobia. Where does the vitriol originate and how do we address it? But first, my comment. So, is it a government of national unity or is it a coalition between the ANC and the Democratic Alliance and then the smaller parties? And does it really matter? So Helen Zille was speaking at an event hosted by the Friedrich Naumann Foundation, and she said a couple of things, right? She says, and I'm going to read part of what she said earlier on. She indicated that as the Democratic Alliance, they are very clear on what this is. She says from the beginning, President Cyril Ramaphosa indicated that they're going to call it a GNU, and she says that's because the president somehow wanted to manage the factions within the ANC, because it would be difficult to explain the coalition between the ANC and the Democratic Alliance, because most of, as you have seen, most of the ANC leaders, or some of them, were against that kind of coalition. Even the SACP came out against it. And she indicated that, well, they called it a GNU, but actually it is a coalition between the ANC and the Democratic Alliance. So from the beginning, Cyril Ramaphosa came up with this notion of a government of national unity. This is what Helen Zille says, which he thought would be a better way of selling the concept of coalition to his party. She stated that the agreement is a coalition agreement between the ANC and the DA and not the GNU that is presented in public. In fact, her exact words are, and I quote here, "Now this, of course, is not a government of national unity, because a government of national unity brings all parties together, which would have to include the EFF and the MK party, which it did not. But it still gave the president the fig leaf he needed to bring in all sorts of smaller parties to say, I'm not in a coalition with the DA." End quote. End quote. And the EFF has come out to say the truth is that this is what we've always known. So what Helen Zille was saying is that this is actually a coalition between the Democratic Alliance and the African National Congress. So that's what she's come out to say. And Professor William Gumede, who is someone who was involved in the beginning when he was in fact asked by the Democratic Alliance and other parties who were forming a grouping to see if they would be strong enough after the elections to take over from the ANC and govern the country. He has come out before to explain what the difference is between a government of national unity and a coalition. This is how he's explained it.
in an ordinary coalition, no party gets the majority. They then put together a coalition of parties to get over 50%. In a government of national unity, there's a difference. In a government of national unity, a party, no party could get a majority, but a party could also get a majority and then decide to bring diversity of parties together because A, there's a crisis in the country, systemic crisis. Two, that party alone cannot deliver. Or cannot alone tackle the crisis, because sometimes, right now as a country we have a systemic crisis where one party or one color, one group could potentially cannot alone govern and change. Yeah, so that's really important.
So there are a few of us who consistently indicated that there's not much of a difference in this context between the GNU and the coalition, just arose by a different name. But other people hold a different view, which is okay. But historically, a GNU was conceptualized as a fallback, so to speak, for time of conflict or instability. And there are several countries, in fact, that have gone this route of GNU, which is why some people said, why would a stable democracy resort to a measure that is democracy's Hail Mary, so to speak, as a friend put it to me recently. The EFF already in the beginning questioned this. So did parties like the MK party as well. But should we care much about what it's called? Because at the end of the day, this is a government inclusive of several parties. So having a specific name for it, what material fundamental changes would that bring? Or does the name GNU, as Helen Zille suggests, somehow helps manage factions in the ANC that are against the ANC going to bed with the DA? Also, while Helen Zille argued that it's a coalition because if one party leaves, then it collapses, would it really collapse if, let's say, the DA left? Because there's still more than 50% that would remain. Right? Remember, the GNU now, as things stand, represent about 70% of electoral support. Listen to how the former president, Jacob Zuma, who's the leader of the MK party, had to say after this GNU was announced to explain what his thoughts are on it.
Together so that we can have a government of national unity. That is meaningless, says nothing. There's nothing. We're just misleading one another to think that it's a good thing. Other people even forgot, thought that they could in fact be together with the DA because they just put this word, government of national unity, others are hiding behind. Now it has become such a thing. But by the abbreviation, GNU.
Yeah, that's what the former president Jacob Zuma had to say. So following what Helen Zille had to say, the ANC has since responded. Fikile Mbalula had this to say earlier today in response to what Zille said.
Helen Zille, not GNU, a grand coalition. He wanted a grand coalition. She wanted a grand coalition. She came and the DA to the negotiations that we must not talk to the EFF, we must not talk to Zuma party and all of these other people, PA and so on. We said no. We have signed a statement of intent with 10 political parties, including the DA. So what is she talking about? So we're not going to entertain Helen and what she is dreaming about and what she wants. We've got the responsibility ourselves and the DA to govern.
There are so many things that the ANC and the Democratic Alliance disagree on when it comes to this arrangement, whether it's a GNU or whether you call it a coalition. I mean, there are clauses in the document of intent that's supposed to drive this arrangement. They disagree on what those clauses mean, and now they disagree on what to call this arrangement that they have. So what do you make of what Helen Zille had to say about this arrangement with the ANC? Do you care at all how this partnership is described and the name that it's given? And why does it matter? That is, it is characterized appropriately. Please send us a WhatsApp voice note right now on 078 459 1897. Remember to tell us your name and say name and where you're sending the voice note from. Please keep those voice notes at 30 seconds. Alternatively, you can send us an X on @FaceTheNation SABC. After the break, we'll speak to Professor William Gumede and Dr. Ongama Mtimka. Stay with us. Welcome back. ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula says DA Federal Chairperson Helen Zille is free to leave the government of national unity if she wants. He was speaking at a media briefing at the start of the 6-day NEC meeting in NEC Lekgotla in Boksburg, that's in the east of Johannesburg. This follows some conflicting remarks by also some ministers and deputy ministers from different political parties in the GNU. Mbalula says they're not going to beg anyone in the GNU. Let's understand what's going on here with political analyst Dr. Ongama Mtimka, who's joining us via Teams, and Professor William Gumede, who's the founder for Democracy Works Foundation, who's with us here in studio. Gentlemen, thank you so much for making time for us. Is it a GNU or a coalition, and does it matter, Professor Gumede?
Good evening, and thank you for having me. I think there's a context because this is the first time that as a country we've put together such a beast. That you know, in the early days there's going to be these type of conflicts and semantics and so on. But I think that the most important thing is that the parties must raise the bar, become more mature, and deal with, and don't have spats outside government, and use that as a learning exercise. I mean, a government of national unity, I mean, just from a definition point of view, it is when a country is in a crisis. We've got 42% unemployment. That is a crisis, as almost the same as a civil war. It's the biggest crisis is that, because we have the impact of that crisis from GBV to lawlessness and so on. So a crisis on its own. So that is why we needed a government of national unity. An ordinary coalition, you just need a majority to form a government. Now, the thing about a national GNU is a little bit difficult and different than a coalition is a consensus decision making. Which in a coalition, if you're a majority party, you make decisions. If your partners don't agree with it, you can push through. Now, in a GNU, you actually have to use the idea of consensus. And consensus is different than majority decision making. In consensus, what you need to do, if there's a difference between the bigger party and the smaller parties, the bigger party can't push its view. It then must compromise to make it, to bring on board the other parties. So that's the first part of it. But the second part of it is that decisions must always be in the national interest, so not in a party's interest, so not in a dominant party interest, but in the national interest. So you get different outcomes.
Dr. Ongama Mtimka, why do you think Helen Zille understands it differently?
Well, good evening to you and your viewers, as well as your guest, Clement. I don't think she understands it differently. So there are two things here. One, there is the intention of the ANC in labeling what it did as a government of national unity. And then there's the effect of it. The effect of it is the actual, core interpretation of what's happened is open to, both approaches. That what you have in effect, and this is what she has to emphasize because of her position in the Democratic Alliance, is that they see this as a grand coalition, right? And the ANC, because of what she correctly points out, sees it as a government of national unity. And I don't think that there has to be a one way or another. She quite correctly points out the politics that, as far as the ANC was concerned, government of national unity became a liberating term in order for them to engage who otherwise have been their arch rivals in the democratic period. And if we want to stretch it further, the political arrangement that brings together representatives of largely a white bloc and a black bloc. That's why I agree that it is, in a sense, a government of national unity, in the sense that the ANC broadened right from the onset who it was talking to. And we mustn't take out the fact that the zero-sum game of those the ANC was pursuing, that is the DA and the EFF, gave us the character of the GNU that we have. At least we know for sure, for certain, that this was the original intent of the ANC as played out in public was a government of national unity in the truest sense of the word, except that the politics of the DA and the EFF gave us the character of the GNU that we have. And in fact, we must add the MK party there because of the hard bargaining that they brought to the table. So while you, in effect, you may have what some want to call more strongly as a grand coalition than a GNU, the intentions of the process, the politics of the process, as far as the dominant player was concerned, were of a GNU. And in fact, true to that principle, even though they had already secured a majority by the time a government was constituted, they went on to pursue
other parties
in the best as they could a GNU.
Yeah. Prof, the ANC earlier today, Fikile Mbalula says, well, Helen Zille can leave if she wants to. What impacts, you indicated earlier that, this is fairly new for us in this context. What impact do these public spats have on this GNU/coalition? Because it's seemingly been stable so far. They seem to be getting along well, especially in the governance, context and governance side. What is the impact of them now coming out and saying all these different things and saying things like you can go, and Helen Zille also creating an impression that, well, we had somehow the upper hand here in the negotiations?
There are two critical impacts of this. The one really is it will cause distrust within the government. Now, a big part of a GNU is you have to build trust. I mean, these are parties that are competed against each other, and now they're in government. They have to agree on substantial policies and on implementation, on decisions and so on. Now, you need trust. Now, if you're going to have irresponsible statements outside, it will then undermine the trust within. But it will also undermine that the authority and the credibility of the GNU outside. I mean, here we have a conversation now. Is this a GNU? Is this a grand coalition and so on? This is not where we should be the conversation. What we now should have been focusing on is, what are the core priorities that will deliver for all South Africans? Now, and it is because of these type of spats, unless they will have to manage the spats. I mean, the other thing about a GNU is it demands higher, more mature leaders than in a normal coalition. Because first, you're going to have to keep quiet, even if you want to scream out, and so you have to behave with
manage
political maturity, and that's the one part of it. That is, if they don't get that right, it will undermine the GNU.
Dr. Mtimka, what do you make of that? Because the Prof says somehow you have to then manage. Doesn't matter how much you're feeling in a moment, just manage what you are communicating out there. It requires mature leaders. In this case, the DA almost has its own spokesperson in Helen Zille of this arrangement. The ANC has its own spokesperson in Fikile Mbalula. Have they conducted themselves in a matured manner?
Two things. Spats are not evidence of things falling apart. Also, by the way, there's a saying in isiXhosa that says "Siphola ngokuthunukwa." It heals getting pricked, or it heals while getting dressed. That talks about a wound. We've done too much of this thing in South Africa, where we must nurse feelings lest we act irrationally and disrupt what we're trying to do. I think that a more truthful engagement is where parties can differ. But what the acid test of the commitment to each other is not whether or not there are times when there are spats. It's whether there can be negotiation of the differences. Because remember, what I like about Helen Zille, yes, she's offensive, but she speaks her heart. She speaks what she feels. And if you listen to that whole presentation, she's somebody who's taking along an audience about how difficult this process has been. Now, she's offensive in her truth, right? In the truthfulness. And we talk about how she may throw some people under the bus. But look at what Fikile Mbalula says. Even though he throws his own spats, he reassures South Africans that we are governing, and so far we are governing well. Now, to me, if they can continue to manage public spats when they happen in ways that show the respect for each of the voices in the GNU, and also the commitment, it's good. Look at what happened in Gauteng, for example, where they refused to vote, the DA refused to vote with the ANC because of what the ANC has done in Gauteng, you know? And so for me, the test is not whether or not they can suppress the differences, is what they do through the differences. It's whether the union can remain through the differences, and this is how all family relationships happen. It's not nursing feelings all the time, even though that's the ideal. It's the question of, after the fights, is there still commitment to still build? And my view is that we need more of this latter approach in South Africa than the non-offense, too cool approach that we've maintained since democracy.
Yeah, Prof, when you look at government now, right? Because these are the politics. These are political parties, but these parties have deployees in government. How have they managed themselves? I mean, as I said earlier, there's been some sense of stability. I mean, even on, for instance, the Bella bill, that the basic education minister has indicated, I'm not entirely happy with that, but I do understand it's on the president's desk. It's his prerogative, but I would love for him to reconsider it, or maybe send it back to Parliament. It's still not communicated in a way that's tasteless, so to speak. So when you look at government, how do you think they've managed themselves? I mean, there were reports of them competing, outshining each other. The ANC released a statement and say that's not necessarily true, but I mean, they are.
Yeah. I mean, one thing is what is missing in a GNU. I mean, my advice to the parties that I had advice ahead of the GNU in their negotiations was to try to create a conflict resolution mechanism beforehand, or ombudsman. I mean, it could be different forms, but any kind of structure. So when you have difficulties, which is unbreachable, that you have an external ombudsman dealing with it, or if you don't have an external ombudsman, you have a conflict resolution. I mean, that a mechanism. Now that is important because all of us have conflicts, whether it's in our intimate space or whether in business or civil society, but it's how you deal with it and what mechanisms you have beforehand and so on. So that's going to be important. The second one, just in terms of how does GNU operate, I think the ANC lost opportunity when it appointed its cabinet ministers. Now, I mean, the party got 39%. That's a 39.7% in the election. That is a big statement from the electorate. The electorate called for change through that. Now, in any other democratic society, opposition parties will put together a coalition. I mean, in South Africa, this is unusual anywhere in the world, where a party gets 39%, a governing party, and then still in government. Now, the challenge was for both the opposition groups, the former multi-party charter and the ANC, both of them in their own negotiations. The challenge was that if to form a government, they needed to get the EFF and MK, but the EFF and MK behave so unconstitutionally and so unpredictably, you can't almost form a government with him and so on. And that was the challenge for the ANC, but it was also for the challenge, for example, if the DA would have tried to put together a government. Now, there are other ways you could skin that cat. For example, in Israel, during the Bennett, in 2020, when Bennett was the prime minister, he had put together a coalition where he had almost parties that were also unpredictable, Like he had two Zionist parties and he had the other party. And the way he structured it at the time was to get those parties to agree not to form part of the core government, but to sign a pact for the government to govern, almost like a minority government, but they're part of it, but they're also not part of it. That was very difficult to do in the South African context because we also had a deadline, a 2-week deadline that a government had to be formed.
Yeah, Dr. Ongama, Mtimka, what do you make of their performance so far in cabinet?
I think it's been fairly okay. It's been fairly well. And under the circumstances, the political circumstances, it's really, doing well. And the test for it was what responses were going to be once at a subnational level there was behavior which is incongruent with the national process. That you have the Democratic Alliance taking the rubbing off the wrong way that happened in Gauteng, remaining in the coalition. And also these parties, having to contend with what happens with the major metros and having those discussions while remaining together. I think for me, it speaks volumes. But also, to Prof's point, the Democratic Alliance took a knock here as far as cabinet portfolios are concerned. Now, it is not uncommon for them to have a rhetoric that seeks to show to their constituents that they didn't get a raw deal completely, and so these. But I think what's crucial is the political communication about the work in government. For one, am not concerned about the competition that has been reported among the ministries, because we want that in order to
it works for us.
And it works for us. However, the messaging around it and the creation of silos is not good. So that competition mustn't be in the spirit of wanting to outshine. It must be in the spirit of wanting to do what's best for South Africans' bed portfolio. And the communication needs to be managed. Now, GCIS used to have a controlled messaging campaign that and protocols, and I think that those have to be revised and reasserted.
All right, Dr. Ongama Mtimka and Professor William Gumede, thank you so much for making time for us on Face the Nation this evening. When we come back, we'll speak to Kenny Kunene, who's with the Patriotic Alliance, and we'll also bring in the EFF. We'll talk about this unhappiness that's being raised around this Miss SA contestant who has both Mozambican and Nigerian heritage. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, there is some division among some South Africans regarding 23-year-old Chidimma Adetshina's potential participation in Miss SA pageant. Patriotic Alliance, that's a political party that says they're pursuing legal action to investigate the matter. This may include seeking an interdict to prevent her participation. The party's primary concern is to establish whether Chidimma is a South African citizen. Patriotic Alliance Deputy President Kenny Kunene joins us now. We'll also bring in the Wits SRC President Bukisa Boniswa, who is a member of the EFF. Kenny, let's start with you. Thank you for making time for us this evening. Why are you concerned about the participation of Chidimma Adetshina as a contestant?
Thank you very much, Clement, for having us. Number one, we always said that we need to put South Africans first. Miss South Africa is clearly definitive of who must participate. It must be South Africans. Miss South Africa is an ambassador of South Africa. Wherever she goes, even when she wins Miss South Africa, she then has to go and compete as Miss Universe or Miss World. So it's a pride. It's a patriotic ambassador leadership that she holds. She's the face of South Africa. So how do you then have a Nigerian being the face of South Africa? So as the PA, our position has always been clear that South Africa must not lose its identity. South Africans must not lose their identity. Mm-hmm. And that which must be contested, or that which must be made up of the character of South Africans, must be for South Africans. This lady is not a South African. Okay.
How do we know that? How have you satisfied yourself with that as the Patriotic Alliance? Because you're saying it as fact.
Number one, her father is not a South African. There is a contestation of whether her mother is a South African or not. She has not come out publicly to state a case. But there's a video that went out, Clement, where she was amongst Nigerians celebrating her as for participating in a Miss South Africa. So how do you have Nigerians celebrating a contestant in a Miss South Africa? So that video makes it clear where her allegiance lie. Her allegiance lie with Nigerians, not South Africans.
I'll get to that. Yeah, we'll get.
And one would say she's got a South African ID. There's many fraudulent South African IDs.
Yeah, but we still don't know that, though. I mean, unless you know for a fact.
I'm not saying her ID is fraudulent, but I'm saying just because she has a South African ID, we can't now say she's a South African. We must investigate that ID.
But the problem, though, is
how she got that ID.
The challenge here, though, Kenny, is that you are saying it as fact that she is not, right? When you haven't gotten the evidence, at least from the Home Affairs Department, that she isn't. And I hear what your concerns you're saying. But have you heard from the Home Affairs Department, for instance, to tell you about her parents?
Her full names are Nigerian. 1, 2, she posted a video, or a video was posted of her being celebrated by Nigerians, not South Africans. So which means, even when she has if that ID is legitimate, her allegiance is with Nigerians.
Well, you don't know if she also celebrated with other South Africans, and maybe that video is not there.
We still have to test the legitimacy and the validity of that ID.
So Ms. Esse says it's done all the necessary checks. In fact, they've come out to indicate that we due diligence to verify the status of all contestants as Ms. Esse. The applicant must be a South African citizen and in possession of a valid South African ID document or passport. If the applicant holds dual citizenship, they provide us with the details of both. All documentation that was provided by all the entrants, including this lady, has been screened and has been vetted. Are you suggesting that Ms. Esse is not telling us the truth?
Who runs Ms. Esse? Do you know? Who runs Ms. Esse? Do you know the vetting process that they're going through? Are they going through intelligence? Are they going through Home Affairs? We can't trust a private company that seeks to make profit, that they have vetted this person. We can't trust that. We want a very transparent vetting process, and that is why, as the PA we are saying, we are considering going to court, and if this woman is indeed a South African legitimately, then the court must pronounce on that. But again, here is a video, Clement, and you can't say a video is not legitimate. No.
But that video doesn't prove anything. I mean, she could have celebrated with other people as well. You just have seen a video where she celebrates with her family.
The video proves her allegiance.
How?
That's what it is.
If her father is Nigerian and some uncles were there to celebrate with her, how does that prove that she's not South African?
That's a problem. it's a problem, because an ambassador of South Africa must be a South African.
Let's bring in now Boniswa, who is with the Economic Freedom Fighters, Bukisa Boniswa, who's the SRC president at Wits. Thank you so much for making time for us. You've heard what Kenny Kunene has had to say. Bukisa, why do you believe, as the Economic Freedom Fighters, that there are people who are being Afrophobic here with their attacks on this young lady?
Good evening to yourself and your viewers. I think, well, first, you can just tell with just generally how different people are treated by the Patriotic Alliance. So, for instance, a few days ago, you had a gold medalist in the Olympics, right? And the pre-assumption is that if you the Olympics, you right? And the Patriotic Alliance, I don't even think it was himself as he did, that particular lady has parents that are not from South Africa. So does that then mean that she's also not South African? So then it brings into the question of, is it really that they're really concerned about people that are not South Africans, or they're purely concerned about Black people living in South Africa, people that they think are not South Africans? And then this then begs the question, is it then a genuine cause that they're fighting for, or is it possibly their own self-hatred because they can't stand to have other Black people coexisting with them? And it's just an effect of they just want to be assimilated and in close proximity of whiteness. That's how I'm diagnosing this particular situation. Because if Kenny Kunene were really their cause, they would have investigated that even to find out, is this person competing in the Olympics actually South African? In fact, what they did is that they went out on Twitter, they celebrated her, she's called the Golden Girl. However, when you then have a Black South African woman trying to compete for Miss South Africa, then she's put into question. I think that is very, firstly, racist, and it's very misogynistic, because you wouldn't then look at, for instance, in the rugby national team, previously, we had Beast, and Beast is of Zimbabwean ancestry. He has family that comes from Zimbabwe and all of that. However, he wasn't put into question. He wasn't questioned about his nationality. He wasn't questioned about his ability to perform. He wasn't questioned about his ability of if he is South African or not. But then you see a Black woman and you then decide, well, let's scrutinize her, let's question her. Is she South African? Is she eligible to contest? And I think that's deeply misogynistic, that's deeply racist. And I think Kenny Kunene and the minister should really confront the big question at hand, which is the question of self-hatred.
Kenny, can you respond to that there? Why are you not questioning other people whose parents were not born in South Africa? There are many people who are even in politics who are first-generation South Africans. Helen Zille's parents are not from here. Natasha Mazzoni. There are many people you can mention in the arts, in soccer, in politics, people who have represented government, but they are South Africans. Have you provided a similar scrutiny on them as well?
Let's deal with this one first. Her father said that she is Nigerian. Her father. Her mother has not appeared. We are being told of her mother who has not appeared. Her father said he came to SA for the first time in 2010. So let us talk facts. Your father is saying, my daughter is Nigerian. And when now you are coming here saying, no, she is South African. So you see the problem with especially the EFF, their politics are not based on principle. Their politics are based on who is the highest bidder and who pays more. Our politics are about principle. The name of our party explains what we stand for. We put this country and its citizens first. And we'll defend that at all times, at all costs.
I I hear that, Kenny, but you also have a responsibility as a party to also base things on fact. I mean, I know the clip you're talking about of the father. Just 1 second, I'll give you a chance. I know the clip you're talking about of a father. You're saying the father says. There's a clip that's doing rounds on social media. How have you verified that that is in fact the father who is speaking there? Have you verified that?
She has not assisted us by coming out and saying that is not my father.
Oh, well, but that doesn't mean you can use that clip as fact.
Her silence is giving weight to what is being said. But that is why, as the peer, we are saying we are considering approaching the courts so that we can be able to compel her and everybody else to give proper clarity and factual information about who she is, who her father is, who her mother is, and whether she's a South African.
But in the meantime,
why we want to approach the courts. Because
in the meantime, you're using stuff that you are finding on social media as truth. You want to go to the court to get facts. But in the meantime,
so what must we use?
Approach the courts. Call the Minister of Home Affairs. The Minister of Home Affairs says you can write to me to request information if it's in the public interest. You can go to court. But what you have done as the Patriotic Alliance is you are taking stuff that is being posted on social media and treating it as fact instead of as a responsible party going to court or writing to the Home Affairs Department and then come back and say, now these are the facts, and based on these facts, this is a position that the party holds.
Clement, you did not read our statement.
I read it.
Our statement is giving background. We have noted with concern what is being said on social media. And based on that, the lady has not come out to respond to these. And now we are considering legal processes so that we can be able to be given factual information. We are even considering interdicting her from participating. Okay. We did not give a conclusive statement there. Our press, our media release is very clear.
Well, when we started this interview,
you can't ignore social media today, Clement. You can't ignore social media today.
No. You have a responsibility, Kenny. I will disagree with you there. I'm not saying you should ignore social media. I'm saying you can't just take anything else that's posted there and assume it as truth. For you to come on this platform and say this girl is Nigerian, when in fact, when you look at our constitution and the Department of Home Affairs has clarified this, they've said, yes, not everybody, hold on 1 second, and I want to bring in Bukisa. I'll give you a chance, Kenny. Not everybody born in South Africa qualifies for citizenship. One of your parents, one has to be a South African or an SA permanent residency permit holder. He says, no one, this is what Njabulo Nzunza, the Deputy Minister of Home Affairs, says. No one so far has written to Home Affairs to ask about the parents of this young lady. Bukisa, let me give you a chance to come in here. Does it help that government is also quiet here? I mean, I know some of them are saying, yeah, we're just watching the situation. But while this continues, this young lady is facing this vitriol and this attack when government could come out and say, this is what we've been able to determine, and that takes her out of the misery. But they've gone to ground.
I think it's very important because it is a very controversial issue on social media. And I think that she's just facing a lot of victimization on the internet that it doesn't really make sense why she has to go through all of it. And I think that Kenny Kunene and Gayton McKenzie are also judging victims on social media, how our parents are. They believe everything on social media. Because the girl has come out and said that it is not her father. And yet, you have Gayton and Kenny Kunene here on this platform lying on a public platform with no facts, with no references, with nothing to back up what they are saying. And yet, even the government in itself and the Department of Home Affairs is also not coming out. And this also just speaks to how generally Black women in this country are treated. That you will heckle you on social media and no one will come to your rescue, even when you're in the right. So I think possibly Kenny Kunene and Gayton McKenzie should possibly invest in the arts of academic research and the art of actually going out and confirming if what you are speaking about is in fact factual. And I think in this case, it's not factual. And quite frankly, they wasted South Africans' time with the lies, and he continues to lie on a public platform because the girl has denounced that video of being of a father. And also the speculations he's making about someone celebrating. Just because you are South African living in South Africa doesn't mean that the only people you interact with are South African. And that's a reality that Gayton and Kenny Kunene need to come to terms with. You have people that are South African citizens that are not from South Africa, that are not born here. And it's our responsibility to make sure that we coexist with these people. And unfortunately, you have the likes of Gayton and of Kenny that don't want to realize that. However, what they want to do is that they want to just assimilate and have proximity to whiteness. And that's why you don't have them calling into question the likes of the lady who competed in the Olympics and won a gold medal, the likes of other people that are in government, a DA MP, as we sitting, you and me right now, a member of your GNU, is not a natural born South African. And yet, you did not put that into question. So please stop coming on public platforms, lying to South Africans and inciting hatred.
Kenny, let me beg. Yeah, you can come in now, Kenny, and also respond to that question of, have you asked people like Abo Natasha Mazoni, Abo Helen Zille, have you said to them, but your parents are not South African. We need to check the legitimacy of your IDs. Have you put scrutiny on other people other than black Africans who are born in this country, but our parents are coming from other countries?
Clement, there's many Africans who are in this country that we interact with without a problem. But let's go back to the facts. The father says he came here in 2010. Which means...
You don't know if that's the father, Kenny. We've just established that you don't know that as a fact.
Let me finish. If he came here in 2010, it means this girl is supposed to be 14 years old now.
But Kenny, we want to waste time talking about someone. You haven't verified that, and I think that's quite irresponsible to take anything that is put up on Twitter. So what I'm saying to you is, how about you as the PA, go verify that, and then make a position on it. But it's quite reckless and irresponsible to take...
But Clement, that's what I said to you. I said our statement is clear. It gives background to what has happened. And our statement is saying, we are now looking at legal avenues.
Then say that. Now you're contradicting your statement.
No. Clement, to force this situation so that clarity can come out. But also, we are considering interdicting this girl from participating. Because Clement, the fact of the matter is, this woman, this girl, is a Nigerian girl.
How do you know that, Kenny?
We cannot argue about.
No. How do you know? How our constitution, I've just read to you what even the Department of Home Affairs says on their website. So if you have parents that are not born in South Africa, they've got citizenship. You are born in South Africa, you even turn 18, you've got an ID, you are South Africans. That's a simple information that is available on government website. When you are saying now, this girl is not South African, that's an irresponsible statement to make, unless you are telling me that Home Affairs has told you that her parents don't have the right papers to be here. They don't have citizenship. And you and I here don't have that information.
Two things. You have not verified whether she is a South African either. Let's start there. Number two, Clement. The court has said, if your mother and father are not South Africans, you can't automatically be a South African. Now, the mother has not come out. The only person that claims to be the father has confirmed that she is a Nigerian.
Claims.
There's no mother.
So it's now someone who claims to be a father.
Yet you are bringing me to this interview without having verified facts yourself.
I have actually, I've gone to look at what the Constitution says, and I've looked at it versus... What must I tell you about? Stuff that people are putting up on Twitter.
No, we are verifying. We are verifying her status as a South African or not.
Yeah, until you verify
That's what
that.
you must verify.
Then until you verify that, don't come as Bukisa.
No, we are saying as PA, we want to take this matter to court.
Absolutely.
We have instructed our legal team. We want the court to force her and everybody else to come out clear as to whether she's a South African or not.
Yes, and you've got every right to do that. I mean, that's in fact what...
And the other option is to interdict her from participating, because there is nothing at this point in time that gives us confidence that she is indeed a South African. We want South African surnames there. We want South Africans to contest Miss South Africa.
Wait, does Natasha, is Mazzoni a South African? Whoa, is Banzoni?
We want what?
Mazzoni, is that a South African surname?
You are not asking me about Miss South Africa. We are talking about Miss South Africa.
Yeah, I'm trying to expose that you lack, but you are lacking consistency. But you are, wait, Kenny.
No, don't be driven by the agenda of the EFF.
Oh, I'm not.
Let us deal with the case in point.
Yeah, let me come in, Kenny.
The case in point is.
Okay, Bukisa. Let me bring in here. I mean, Mazzoni is not even a South African name, but if you are African from Nigeria for some reason, you must have a South African name. That just exposes your lack of consistency. Bukisa, what kind of support is being... I'll give you a chance, Kenny. We need to give Bukisa an opportunity here to speak as well. Bukisa, please can you come in here and tell us what kind of support are you providing for Chidimma? Because on social media, this is what's happening. Even though Ms. SA has come and said, we have verified, you've indicated that maybe government needs to come out. Bukisa, what kind of support are you providing?
That's a private company. They've got interest.
Yeah, can you give Bukisa an opportunity to speak?
Don't tell me about people who have got vested interest, who are protecting themselves.
Kenny,
this is here about proper verification, and we are going to court. Clement, by the way, we are going to interdict this process. She must not participate. We want South Africans to participate as Miss South Africa. That is a patriotic ambassadorship.
Okay, got it. Kenny, thank you. Bukisa, you can come in.
Thank you very much.
I really wish that Kenny Kunene was as this passionate when it comes to issues of women representation and gender-based violence in this country, but we won't. However, with regards to the support that the EFF would be providing, if they are going to court, we will meet them at court, and that interdict, as well as it pass, at all. And
the EFF is a foreign organization anyway.
Kenny, you're being very unfair now. I've given you a chance. Please, can you give Bukisa an opportunity to finish your point?
That interdict is not going anywhere, and this just exposes how the lack of respect that this man has for black women. Because
no. You see, Clement.
Kenny, please, this is a conversation.
You are biased.
Let her finish her point.
What has verifying the credentials of a woman and the validity of a status in this country has got to do with respect for women?
All right, Kenny.
What has that got to do with respect for women?
All right, Kenny, clearly you...
Right now, when I gave you a platform to speak, I gave you a platform to speak. I will speak. Chin, as we were saying, that interdict of theirs is not going to go anywhere, and she is going to compete in Miss SA. In fact, we are going to support her to a point where she makes it to the finals and potentially she wins Miss SA, because she's a rightful candidate to compete in Miss SA, and Miss SA has proven that she is a South African citizen. They have done their checks and balances. And yet you have people that are deeply misogynistic and deeply racist and have hatred for themselves. That will platforms like this, and they will try to make sure that black women like herself don't succeed. And the EFF is 100% behind her, and she will win Miss SA.
All right, Bukisa, Boniswa, and Kenny Kunene, I appreciate both of your time this evening on Face the Nation. And thanks to you for watching the Thursday edition of Face the Nation. We'll be back next week, Tuesday, at 8 p.m. Have a good evening. Cheers.